And now, here's a fact check for today's episode. Nia Sean talked about tin can phones as early modes of communicating voice over distances. A tin can phone works by turning your voice into vibrations that travel along a string or wire, then back into sound. People also experimented with pipes and other acoustic tricks long before electricity entered the picture. We also mentioned Antonio Meucci as an earlier inventor of the phone in 1849. The story is a little more complicated. Meucci started working on telephone concepts in the late 1850s and kept refining them until around 1870. In 1871, he filed what's called a patent caveat, a notice of intent to file, but he couldn't afford to renew it after 1874. That gap left space for others, including Alexander Graham Bell, to move forward. Other inventors also lay claim to having invented the phone. These include Johann Philipp Reis, who coined the word telephone, along with Innocenzo Manzetti, Charles Bussell, Amos Dolbear, Sylvanus Cushman, Daniel Drawbaugh, Edward Farrar, and James McDonough. Alexander Graham Bell is, however, always remembered because he successfully patented the telephone. Speaking of Bell, we mentioned on his background as a teacher of deaf students. Interestingly, both his wife and his mother were also deaf. Whether the personal connection directly drove him to invent the telephone is harder to pin down. Now, talking about Elisha Gray. Gray was working with liquid transmitters for voice transmission. On February 14, 1876, he filed a patent for his design, the very same day Bell's lawyer submitted a complete patent application. Bell's was processed first, and the rest is history. Gray claimed Bell had taken his idea, but it was never proven. MFA mentioned that 86% of the world owns a telephone. That is true. Today, there are over 5.2 billion smartphone users, about 2/3 of the world's population. And if you count basic mobile phones, more than 86% of people on Earth have at least a basic mobile phone. There was a question about whether cables were laid to Europe before the 1900s. For telephones, no. The first transatlantic telephone cable wasn't launched until September 1956, around the time Ghana was pushing for independence. In 1963, Bell Telephone introduced push-button touch-tone dialing, replacing the old rotary dials. A decade later, in 1973, the first mobile phone call was made. The earliest smartphone was IBM's Simon Personal Communicator, announced in 1992, released in 1994. And finally, in the debate over Android versus iOS, Apple's iPhone came first in 2007. Android followed in September 2008, and the Android market, now called the Google Play Store, opened that same month. And that's your fact check for today. I'm your host, Paige Turner. See you next time for our next episode of How Did We Get Here?